Welcome back, my friends. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you stack silver and you like your daily videos to be uncensored, you've come to the right place. Make sure you guys subscribe. Today, we have a special episode. We are here with Andy Schectman, the CEO of Miles Franklin, one of the most, if not the most respected company out there. Hit me up if you guys want silver. We have weekly deals. Right now, we have Maple Leafs 375 over spot, minimum of 50, but tons of other stuff. 100-ounce bars, great prices, tons of different 10-ounce bars. 2024 Eagles are in. Slayer at milesfranklin.com. It's really nice talking to you guys and building relationships. I appreciate that. We got Andy here, the man himself. There's a lot of stuff happening. This is going to be a great episode. I made a post on my channel last week asking you guys to throw some questions out for Andy. So I'm going to screen share the questions. We'll go through. We'll answer them for you guys. Andy, what's going on? I know a lot's been happening. So is there anything you wanted to talk about before we jumped into the questions?
Let's see. Yeah, there are a few things that are worth talking about before we jump into the questions, I think, but I'm looking forward to answering everyone's questions. I wonder how many people out there know that the LME, the London Metals Exchange, was purchased by China a few years ago. Now, think about that for a moment. The topic that the concept that I present over and over and over again is the concept of logarithmic decay, where all of these things, whether we talk culturally, economically, morally, socially, or in the case of the dollar, and the plotting of the BRICS nations is little by little by little by little by little by little by little, then bang, all at once. It's chopping down a tree with a butter knife. It takes a long time, little by little. Every swat takes a little piece out. It's, if you ever watched the movie The Shawshank Redemption, he cut his way through with like a spoon or whatever. It took him years to dig the hole and finally get out all at once. But little by little by little, he made significant progress. And that's kind of what's happening when I look at the Chinese, the little by little by little. And it's interesting, a few weeks ago, we saw that the LME was going to start posting or hosting contracts off the Shanghai exchange. Now in Shanghai, silver's $2.50 nearly, $2.30 higher than it is in London or on the COMEX. That's arbitrage territory where the traders who have access to both markets will buy in London, will buy in Chicago, will sell in Shanghai. That metal will never come back, ever. And that's why they are slowly turning up the heat. 10% interest in arbitrage, traders will jump all over that. They'll buy, millions of ounces and sell them for $2.50 higher than they paid for them. Who wouldn't do that, right? Except the bigger picture of it is the metal will never come back. Gold has been between 60 and $160 higher per ounce, same thing. You'll see that number go higher and higher and higher as they slowly drain the system. And, they went first by draining the COMEX and then doing an exchange for physical and attempting to drain the LME. They're taking it out of the ETFs. They're getting anything they can that's not nailed down. So step number 2 would be to slowly turn up the heat and arbitrage as much as you can get over there. And how about this one? Because it's owned by the Chinese, we now just saw that they are registering warehouses in China, which is the world's largest consumer of industrial metals and probably the largest accumulator of precious metals, to store metals traded on the LME. What? China is going to be warehousing metals traded on the LME. Who owns the LME? China does. So think about that for a moment when you think about little by little by little by little. And, they did buy it for $2.2 billion a few years ago, the LME. Chump change when you're China, when you have been selling your party favors to the world for years and stockpiling dollars in this massive trade imbalance. But that's the thing. Instead of buying party favors, like the West, they're going and buying oil refineries. They're building gold mines. They're buying the massive, the oldest 140-year-old trading hub for gold, the LME. They're industrializing nations, building roads and railways and bridges and maritime channels, and they're doing things mutually cooperative instead of coercive. And this is how they will be able to survive their massive economic downturn right now, because of their massive stash of natural resources and the cooperative deals that they have struck around the world. This is no different. And I think people need to understand that. The other topics that I think are worth talking about, and then we'll answer the questions for sure, is that in my opinion, we have an environment right now where inflation is only going to get worse. And we just saw the shipping. Remember in 2020 when everyone was talking about price inflation because of the
Trade wars.
well, no, in 2020 it was because of the supply chain problems with COVID.
Yeah, yeah.
And supply chains got shut down. Well, when you look at what's happening in the Red Sea, this is exactly the exact same thing that it is happening. We're seeing huge problems with shipping product like from China to Los Angeles. The cost just went up 500%. And so instead of going through places like the Straits of Hormuz, they have to go around the Cape of Good Hope, and the cost is much more. The delay is much more. You will begin to see inflation run higher and higher and higher and higher. And excuse me, you want 400% from 1,000 to 5,000. And I think it's interesting to note that this is an election year, and if you look at what inflation really is, inflation is an increase in the money supply. And there was an interesting chart that I found on Twitter that showed from 1959 to 2023, it showed the M2 money supply. And inflation is an increase in the money supply. And that's plain and simply what it is. And rising prices characterized by the CPI is a symptom of rising prices. But the CPI has been massaged and changed so many times that it doesn't reflect accurate inflation. John Williams of Shadow Stats, who uses the metrics that they used to be calculated by before they changed it, says inflation's at 11%, and we're supposed to believe it's at 4% right now. If you look at the last 50 years, actually it's even longer than that. It's the last 60 years. Every single year from 1959 to 2023, the money supply was up. Every single year, up on average 7%, with the exception of 2022, it was down 1%, 2023 down 2%. M2 contracted. You heard about this big contraction in the money supply. People were talking about it and what that would mean to the economy. Well, for 60 years, it was up every single year, and then it was only down 1% and 2%. In 2020, it was up 25%. In 2021, it was up 12%. That is inflation, increase in the money supply, period. And everyone's been talking about this big contraction in the money supply, and that's what's going to quell inflation. Well, lo and behold, it's an election year, and M2 just turned back up again. The government borrowed $47 billion a few days ago in one day. Since they raised the debt ceiling, which they've done 79 freaking times, 79, since they raised it in June, the debt is up $3 trillion. And how long ago was a trillion seconds? 31,688 years ago. Since October 1st, the government has borrowed $10 billion per day. And for the next year, the debt ceiling is uncapped. And so, I think the world is beginning to realize that a country that has a money supply increase of 7% per year could do a lot better than buying 10-year treasuries that are paying 3 or 4%. That is a negative yield real return of 3 or 4% compounding. And so you're seeing countries that are selling treasuries and they are buying gold instead of U.S. treasuries. And this is a big deal. It's a growing trend that I think we can expect to see. And I just want people to understand that, look, it's a politicized Fed. They're going to do what they can to keep the current administration afloat. But we are a country right now with 34 trillion in debt, almost 200 trillion in unfunded liabilities, a $500 billion trade imbalance, and over $1 trillion in annual interest payments. They're not going to fix inflation. They will blow up the entire system. So please keep this in mind. The only other thing I wanted to bring up that I found interesting, you mentioned something about, you and I offline, about the Silver Institute's numbers. And you and I have talked at length about the lack of reporting on military in the Silver Institute's numbers. I said this at the Vancouver Resource Investment Conference a year ago, and a gentleman got up and said, what I'm going to tell you is declassified. I work for the DoD, and I actually was on the team that developed the Patriot missile, and I know there's silver in it. I just don't know how much. I'll let you know. Well, he was at the show here last week, 2 weeks ago, when I was in Vancouver speaking, and he showed me pictures and all sorts of stuff of how he helped develop it, and all declassified. He said, but that he said, you're right. There's between 15 and 16 kilos of silver in the tip of a Tomahawk cruise missile. And he validated it. He helped design it. And if there's that much silver in a Tomahawk cruise missile, where's the rest of the silver going in all of these other forms of high-tech weaponry? And it's just becoming obvious that the military industrial complex has a lot to do with holding the price of silver down. And so in a world where inflation is only going to get worse, in a world where you have countries around the globe like India, who has imported roughly 400 million ounces of silver in the past 2 years, and you look at COMEX only has 276 million ounces of silver on it, of which 41,600,000 are for sale. The rest isn't. And so when you realize that India's imported 10 times as much as there are bars available for sale on COMEX right now, the demand for silver is off the charts. The military-industrial complex has been holding it down to fight the wars or supply munitions to all these countries for years and years and years. But the one thing they didn't count on was countries like India, countries like China, that years ago were called them third world almost, and now they've become industrialized, they've become wealthy, and they understand the importance that silver plays as a strategic metal, not just an industrial metal. So I think it's important to understand, and right now on COMEX, just so people understand, you have a 1,642% open interest to registered bars, meaning there's nearly 17 contracts issued for every one 5,000-ounce lot of silver bars. If everyone stands for delivery, 16 get cash settled. We're this close to things breaking. And I just think that that's very important to talk about. So, anyways, I could keep going. There's a lot to talk about, but I have a feeling a lot of what I want to talk about will be incorporated in the viewers' questions. So why don't we do that?
Yeah, I just want to mention, I actually made a video a couple of days ago showing how much silver is in each missile, 30, 40 different missiles, and it showed that average about 240 ounces. But yeah, there's 500 in a Tomahawk, and I think they even calculated each of those, how many is like 85 million ounces in all of the different types of missiles we have. It's a very interesting article that they actually showed that. Do you think there's going to be, I mean, obviously we had the 3 US soldiers that got killed in Jordan, and Biden comes out and says we're going to retaliate. What do you think about that? Like, this Iran war, I feel, is looming, and you talked about this last year. You called this before anything you started. You said, I think our end goal is going to war with Iran, and now you see this happening. So
I think when all else fails, you take them to war. I think that if you look at those countries that were just admitted to BRICS, Ethiopia, look at, you know what? Can you pull up a map of the Middle East real quick and screen share? I want to show you something.
I actually just made a video covering that as well. Hold on.
You're a hardworking man. Are you able to screen share?
Yeah. Let me
now look at the Red Sea and you know, the Persian Gulf, the Straits of Hormuz and whatever. You got Ethiopia, Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. I mean, you've got the Persian Gulf surrounded, the Red Sea, the Straits of Hormuz. You have all of these very, very important areas stranglehold. And this is more about energy than it is anything else, in my opinion. And when you realize that the majority of the world's oil is right there, it's no coincidence. So certainly I would argue, you know, taking over Iraq at the time had very similar motivation. So look, at some point, the world probably already has grown very tired of this constant warring. And God help us if we go to war with Iran. I mean, look, how many wars can we take part in? And
It's
but think again what I was saying about the military industrial complex
exactly,
and the need to hold down silver.
exactly
When you hear of a drone being shot down by a missile, the drone
has
is
silver
cheap,
missiles.
might be a couple 100,000. The missiles is a few million.
Yeah,
And so every one of these missiles, boom, 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 million, 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 and silver gone, silver gone, silver gone, silver gone, silver gone, little by little by little by little. And so they are running out of the ability. I mean, look at all the munitions that we've given away to the Ukraine as an example, or sold to them. And at what point have we extended ourselves too far? Go back and look at Roman times. You had a very similar analogy where they were out being the policemen of the world and conquering the world, and they overextended themselves. We are a country that is, massively in debt, and military spending is discretionary spending. The Congressional Budget Office, which is the last maybe bipartisan group in Washington, said that in less than 7 years, all the tax revenue we take in will go to pay just the interest on the debt and mandatory entitlement spendings like Social Security, which is 77 trillion in the whole. But how do you pay for a military? How do you retain having the world's most dominant military that goes around the world being the policeman when you have to borrow money from the world in order to fund your military? Because it's discretionary spending, either that or the Federal Reserve prints or buys rather the treasury bonds. And, maybe we should believe that the Cayman Islands is the third or fourth largest holder of US treasuries. Or is that really the Federal Reserve and a shell corp in the Cayman Islands? I don't know, just asking. And the point of it is, at what point does this become hyperinflation, when you monetize your own debt? But these are very, very scary times, man. And I think what I find really confusing is how quiet it is in this industry right now, as the world is being bled dry of metal from the most sophisticated investors. It's like we were bitch slapped by the front of the storm for the last 3 years, and now we're in the eye of the hurricane. The trailing edge is coming. And ask yourself this: there's 200 meetings between today and October, when the large BRICS meeting is in place, where 30 other countries have formally applied, another 20 have informally applied, where we were told by the finance ministers of the BRICS nations that they would task their finance minister with going back to the drawing board, coming back for a common settlement currency to the meeting in Russia in October. So between a potential commodity-backed currency, as they've been saying for 3 years is going to happen, between a potential 30 to 50 countries admitted to the BRICS, between all of these things that happen between now and October, and an election in November, with 12 million people entering this country illegally, where if 0.2% of those people have less than pure intentions, that's 24,000 fighting age men. If you were to send the full force of the United States military to a ground war, it's a few 100,000, not 12 million. And you can call it an invasion. And who's going to pay for these people? The schooling, the medical,
that's a whole other,
the housing. Who's going to pay for that? I think that these are realities. These are problems that, if you believe it will be smooth sailing between now and October, I can't even believe it. Or November, I should say. The BRICS meeting in October and the election in November. And you have the head of the FBI, you have even President Trump, you have all of these people saying there's going to be a homegrown terror attack. How many times do you need to hear it before, when it happens, we were told, planting a seed? I mean, they know it's coming. What's it going to be? Is everyone going to get a phone call at the same time? And, and they're all, if you look at the board of the, and Fox News does this a lot. They'll go and ask, and these are all guys younger than you. And where are you going? I'm going to New Jersey. I'm going to Miami. I'm going to Nebraska. I'm going to Colorado. I mean, every single one of them is going somewhere different. And, it's a little scary. So how much damage could be done? God forbid, right? But when we talk about the significance of both the BRICS meeting and the election, ask yourself, do you think this is going to go smoothly between now and then?
Right.
And that's what I mean about being in the eye of the hurricane. This is not about getting wealthy, you guys. This is about keeping all of the wealth in which you've obtained and worked hard to get. This is getting real, dude. And I mean that in the bottom of my heart.
People are desensitized.
Well, of course they are, because they suffer from normalcy bias and recency bias. We grew up in a country, the greatest country in the world, where everything was law and order and okay. where it was our birthright to live better than our parents and their parents before them, where, you know, it was okay to go massively into debt, which is stupidity, but yet this is what we're taught to do. But it was okay because, you know, everything just worked out for this country. But we have exhausted the good graces
Right.
of a lot of people around the world. And I keep coming back to the same thing. If we were a country that was united and not divided, if we had a country that respected, you know, their teachers, respected the police, respected their family, respected the nuclear family, if we were a country that was united, we could get through anything. But we are a country that is massively divided. We are a country that is massively broke and overextended and under funded or undercapitalized in every way, personal and government, and it's not good. And when you see this cultural war that we see between
Yeah.
nationalities and red and blue and, you know, vaccine and no vac, all of this divisiveness, cultural wars become very dangerous in an economic downturn, especially a severe one. And I just think that
Right.
these are
It's
times that people are, as you said, are desensitized. They are. I think a lot of people are in for a very rude awakening. I am
yeah.
very concerned that something is going to happen between now and November, and I would almost bet my life on it. So
I was gonna say
hope I'm
it's almost
wrong.
it would be highly unlikely if it didn't. I mean, a civil war and all these other wars with other countries. I mean, and all it takes is 5, 10 people to do something that could change America. I mean, all it takes is you said 24,000 people. All it takes is
That's 0.2%,
yeah,
and I
yeah, and
mean,
that
so
and
what if
two
it's
tenths per
5%?
like and 2/10 of the 24,000, like all that take like how many, it's so crazy. You would like some of the videos I've made recently. One, I went into the military industrial complex, the Defense Department raiding silver stockpiles, and incorporated that with um a potential a silver confiscation to some degree, and not in terms of how we have like the executive order 6814 from FDR 1934, but more from a perspective of if the Defense Department's already raiding our stockpiles, what happens when those stockpiles are dry? Their silver wins wars, and I hope they're going to find a way to get the silver to make the missiles. That was and I took my time on that video. A lot of people really like this video. I really like, I structured it in a way that made sense. I showed articles and I fit that into different, it was cool. But then this other article I found, the guy was talking about how the BRICS have their own types of issues within themselves because of religion and all of that. So it's not as rainbows and unicorns. They have their own hurdles to
I'd like to
cross.
talk
With
about that too,
yeah,
but before
that
I
was a
do,
very interesting
well,
article.
look, when you talk about the BRICS, the difference between what people don't understand about the BRICS, sure, they do have their own hurdles to get over. I would argue that their enemy's enemy is their friend, that dealing with these hurdles is something that they would probably find less of a hurdle than it would be dealing with the West. And
Sure. Yeah.
I think that it's important to understand that when you look at the BRICS, these countries are doing things in a cooperative manner. There is no um, they do not have a am I trying to say? They are not bound to any rules. They are together out of cooperation. They are not. They are
That's a
doing
good
so
point.
specific, and so they're not. They are not bound to rules and regulations. They are doing it in a cooperative
Yeah,
fashion. And
they're applying. It's not like they're forced to. Yeah, they're coming out and saying we want to join this. So it's more of like a, that makes sense.
and it's important to understand that, but they don't have obligations to one another, I guess is what I'm trying to say. All of the cooperation is voluntary. And
Yeah.
so when you realize that this is a cooperative endeavor where the presidency rotates every year. It was in South Africa last year. It's in Russia this year. It is if you look at the way they're striking deals around the world, building infrastructure and whatnot in a cooperative manner, I mean, that's the way all business and trade should be. Like even little kids on the playground trading crackers for cookies, you know. If I have something you want and you have something I want, then we trade. And that's what it is. And when you talk about the role of money in all of this, money is just used if I don't want what you have, I'll buy it with money. So, but when you talk about cooperation, these countries all have the natural resources, and so they are trading with one another and with cooperation. Some of the countries, all of the 30 countries that have formally applied, if you look at what they have inside, every single one of these countries that have formally applied recently are massively natural resource rich, every single one of them. And a lot of them, the common denominator is that they haven't really been able to industrialize these natural resources. So China comes in and the BRICS nations come in and they help them, the BRICS New Development Bank, and they help them develop their infrastructure and their natural resources. And then they build, channels to help them get them out. Let me just read a couple of them real quick. I know you want to get to these questions, but
No,
all right,
this
so
is
Afghanistan, these are the countries that have formally applied. They're rich in resources like copper, oil, natural gas, uranium, coal, iron ore, rare earths, lithium, chromium, blah, blah, blah. Algeria has the 10th largest proven natural gas reserves globally, is the world's 6th largest gas exporter, and has the world's 3rd largest untapped shale gas resource. Bangladesh, one of the world's top 5 fastest growing economies, and shares a 4,100-kilometer border with India. Bolivia, very rich in minerals, including tin, silver, lithium, and copper. China has also invested considerable sums of money into the country via the Belt Road Initiative, including neighboring Peru, with ports specifically built to handle future Bolivian exports. Cuba, an active member of the Belt Road. Cuba shares close cooperation in infrastructure, technology, science, tourism, and energy. Ecuador, negotiating free trade agreements with China and Eurasian Economic Union. Indonesia has abundant natural resources. Primary industries are fishing, petroleum, timber, paper products, cotton, cloth, petroleum, natural gas, bauxite, coal, and tin. Its main agricultural products are rice, coconut, soybeans, bananas, coffee, tea, palm, rubber, sugarcane. Kazakhstan economy is highly dependent on oil and related products. It's in addition, its main export commodities include natural gas, ferrous metals, copper, aluminum, zinc, and uranium. Mongolia, resource-rich and transit point between Russia, Kazakhstan, and China. Nicaragua, the leading gold-producing country in Central America. Nigeria is a nation that has the world's 9th largest gas reserves and significant oil reserves. Pakistan is already a member of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, holds a key position within the Belt Road Initiative. It's ultimately intended to link Western China to the Persian Gulf and includes the Gwadar port on the Arabian Sea. Senegal, with reserves in oil and gas and gold, the energy industry is at a growth stage and reserves have only recently been found. The BRICS nations will be keen to secure its supplies. Sri Lanka's Hambantota and Colombo ports are considered as epicenters of China's Belt Road Initiative in South Asia. They can be used as a regional maritime hub between South Asia, Southeast Asia, Central Asia, Middle East, and East Africa. This in turn gives additional import connectivity routes via the international north-south transportation corridor from Pakistan's Gwadar or Iran's Shabanar port through Central Asia, on and on and on. Sudan, top five export markets are 100% BRICS, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, India, and the UAE. If they join, it would give complete control of the Red Sea routes. So Sudan was one of those. It gives complete control of the Red Sea if they join. Sudan is the African continent's 3rd largest gold producer. There's 30. No, these are the top 20. So there's 4 more. Thailand, it's in the ASEAN, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. So they're just natural to fit in there. Turkey, again, Turkey asked to be part of the European Union and they turned them down. So now they're joining the BRICS. Uruguay, I don't know what they have. I didn't write that down, but Uzbekistan, 80 tons of gold annually, 7th in the world. 10th in the world copper deposits. What else does it say there? It says national ranks 11th in the world in natural gas, 7th in the world globally in uranium, significant untapped resources of oil and gas, and then Venezuela, number 20, the world's largest known oil reserves. So, when you talk about all the countries that are joining BRICS, this is a massive deal that is coming in October. There's 30, that was 20. There's another 10 that have formally applied, and another 20 or more that have informally applied. So yeah, this is crazy.
This came out 4 hours ago. South Africa says 5 countries confirmed they're joining BRICS. January 31st, 2024. Literally 4 hours ago.
Well, you know why they're saying that? Because Saudi Arabia was the one that had not fully committed yet.
Yeah.
And the fact that they have is huge. You know, it's huge. And that's why I like the term logarithmic decay. Little by little by little, these
5 out of the 6 they have confirmed: Saudi Arabia, UAE, Ethiopia, Iran, and Egypt. Argentina has written indicate they will. Yeah. Oh, that's what I want to mention. Argentina declined. I thought
right.
that was
that's their new president, and okay, fine. So take Argentina out. That's okay. The ones that have, and Argentina would have been a good example, you know, they with their natural reserves, but also they control the Straits of Magellan. So the common denominator between all of these countries is their trade routes and their natural resources. So they're doing things cooperatively and not coercively. And that's a big difference. And that's why this is a different organization than the world who suffers from recency bias understands. So let's get to the questions, man. What do you got?
Yeah. All right. So here we go. So there's no particular order, but we can go over some of these one. Like I like this one. It says, talk about when they reset the value of gold and silver and how it pertains to a stacker of silver. And when can we pay off things like big debt, mortgages, cars, etc., or purchase property? How will we know what time is right? Some people say we won't be able to do it. Please elaborate.
Well, you know, will gold and silver reset? I think ultimately they will. It's interesting. Gold and silver are held in accounts around the globe in central bank accounts, and the name of the account is the gold revaluation account. But really, what is going to reset is not the price of gold as much as it will be the dollar value, but maybe not. I mean, if you look at what the head of the Dutch National Bank said, he said the Dutch Central Bank is that, you know, look, gold in our gold revaluation account is valued at $35 an ounce. All of the gold in the European central banks is still valued at $35 an ounce on their balance sheet. If they were to revalue it at, let's say, 10,000 an ounce, 5,000 an ounce.
I was going to say 5,000, maybe.
If that's what it was at, it would render their balance sheet much better when you balance assets and liabilities. In many cases, it could make their balance sheets from a massive deficit to a surplus. And don't think that can't happen. That's exactly what Roosevelt did in 1933. Gold was $20 an ounce. He paid everyone $20.67, and you made 67 cents. Back then, that was a lot more than it is today. And then he devalued the dollar by 40%. Gold then went up to $35 an ounce. I mean, is it that unusual to think that they could do something like that? Well, you know, a 40% increase in gold from where we are right now, you don't know. Who knows? I mean, that puts it at what, just under 3,000. What if they put it at 5,000 or at 8,000? And now all of a sudden the gold on your balance sheet reflective against your liabilities, it's a whole different scenario. So could it happen? Will it happen? Yeah, ultimately I think it has to happen.
Yeah, there you go.
And the ownership in physical metals is so small in the United States that I don't think that we have to worry about confiscation. Those few people that have been able to hang on will be very glad that they did, I think. And an ounce of gold or an ounce of silver will buy a whole lot more than it does today in a world where, you know, everything collapses. And the likelihood of seeing something like that happen, look, if we lose the petro status, and I've talked about this with you more than anyone. You know, we sign an executive order to go green. All these countries are joining BRICS. UAE says they're not taking dollars anymore for oil. So does Iran. So does Russia. At what point does all of OPEC say that. And then what happens when every country in the world who stockpiled dollars for 50 years no longer needs them and dumps them? You have hyperinflation, the dollar collapses, the banks collapse because interest rates go to the moon to compensate for hyperinflation, but so do stocks, bonds, and real estate. It's the Great
There you
Reset.
go.
And in that moment, gold and silver will be a whole lot more than
It's the only
than a pet rock. It will save your life.
right. So this question, I'm torn between high interest rate cash savings and cheap silver. Could you all discuss how high interest rates affect the silver price? And if interest rates stay high, how will that affect silver prices long
Well,
term?
there's a term in economics called Gibson's paradox, which is the inverse relationship between real interest rates and the price of gold. And you're right, 5% interest rates in a 6-month treasury are intriguing. I own some. But in terms of its real return, it's negative. I mean, it is because inflation, they tell you, is at roughly 4%, but the CPI is a lie. Go to John Williams of Shadow Stats, where he will accurately tell you what inflation is based upon the way they used to be before they changed the metrics, before they changed the CPI, the way they gauge it. In 1980, they would tell you that inflation today is at 11%. So let's just say inflation's 10 or 11%, you're getting 5% on a 6-month treasury. And if you roll it and hold it for a year, rebuy it again at the same rate, if that were the case, your real return would be 6% compounding, negative 6%. So yes, look at, let's just sidestep silver for a moment because of the suppression and the manipulation. And even though it's held its own, over 11 straight interest rate increases. Look what gold has done. And in an environment where rates are rising, what happens if they try to drop rates? So, well, people may be saying to themselves, well, Andy, you're saying the whole system collapses and rates go to the moon. Wouldn't that mean gold and silver would collapse? In a normal environment, the answer would be yes, because if you can there's something in economics called the law of 70 seconds, where you take the interest rate you are being charged and divide it into 72, and it tells you how long before your principal doubles or that you are charging. So at 10% interest rates in 7.2 years, the money you had in a treasury at 10%, in 7 years, it would double. So, if you had 20% interest rates in just over 3 years, your money doubles. Why would people hold gold in that environment? Well, if you have 20% interest rates, it's because your currency is dying. And it is because no one wants your currency. And at that point, would you rather be earning 20% in a dying currency, or would you rather have gold and silver, which have been money for 5,000 years? In that environment, my friend, he who loses least wins. And I think that's the difference, is that in a normal market, in an orderly, normal market where everyone trusts and loves the United States, if you had, 8, 9, 10% interest rates, gold would be dead. In a country where we've lost credibility, we've lost integrity, we've exhausted the good graces of our foreign creditors in most of the world, and the inside of our country is a divisive mess. I would argue that those rates will have a very minimal effect on gold's demand globally.
So this question, it's one of those where, it's someone looking at precious metals from an investment perspective. They mention, how can stackers best capture the gains from a potential once in a lifetime AG moonshot? With silver being more volatile than gold, historically it spikes higher, but doesn't stay there for very long. Rafi Farber and others have suggested a silver spike might only last months to weeks. If one wanted to transform a silver stack into a small, quiet homestead away from insanity, where they could grow potatoes, walk the dog? What's a smart way to do that? Thanks to you and Andy for all the hard work and great info.
Yeah, well, you act quickly. Once I lock it in, it's locked in. We can help you get it sent back. Trade it to gold at that moment. When the price of silver moonshots, I would argue that it will also be more reflective of a real ratio between gold and silver. If you want to go to fiat, that's what you do. But pigs get fed, hogs get slaughtered. And most people don't sell when they should, and most people don't buy when they should.
Right.
So
Right.
if you set goals and and rules to your goals that if it gets here, I'm selling, or at least a portion of it, then you avoid that problem. The last 2 times silver spiked to $50, it was just for a couple of days, so or less. So I would say if it gets to $40, I'm selling this or converting it to gold. If it gets to 50, have some rules. It's the only way you'll ever nail that down. But I do agree. I think we will wake up one morning to see metals prices markedly higher. And that's when you're going to see a shift from COMEX to LBMA, or from COMEX and the LBMA to the Shanghai Exchange, or one of these other exchanges across the globe where gold and silver have a much more relevant, impactful meaning to their culture and their population than they do to the United States.
Yeah. So this guy says, please ask him if the COMEX closes and Western bullion markets go dark, if he will keep his doors open and attempt to supply demand for precious metals. Does he have any plans to acquire supply outside from Western systems? Also, would he become a bank or depository if silver gold was suddenly unattainable?
Well, it's really hard to do because
Yeah.
what COMEX allows me to do is hedge my risk. So, you know, if I have 10,000 ounces of gold in my warehouse, I sell 10,000 ounces on COMEX. Because if the price goes down $100 on 10,000 ounces, I'm out $1 million. If it goes up by $100, I'm up $1 million, but I can't take that risk with my inventory. Right. So if it goes down by $100 and my physical holdings are down $1 million, what I sold short on COMEX, a covered short, meaning I have the metal covering the short position. And if it goes down by 100, I'm down $1 million in my holdings physically, but I'm up $1 million on my COMEX account. It allows me to be market neutral. So in essence, what the COMEX was designed for were for people and farmers and whatnot to be able to hedge their exposure. A farmer who plants his field in April, and a baker who needs to secure wheat in September, well, they work out a deal on the exchange. I'll buy your production, and this is what I'll pay you. And if you're okay with that, I like that price. Let's do a deal. Well, now the farmer, he knows that no matter what, he's got his product sold. Now, the risk in it is that all of a sudden there's a wheat shortage and he sold way too cheap. But the other side is, well, maybe it's a horrible year and it rained a lot and the quality of the crop is horseshit. Well, the baker already agreed to the price. They have the contract. And when he takes delivery, he knows that he will have wheat to make his bread. And the farmer knows that he is now de-risked the whole year. It's to offset risk on both parties, but it's turned into a gambling casino. If you were to see the COMEX blow up, dealers like myself could not hold large inventories. The risk would be extraordinary. So it would dramatically change the market, dramatically. And it would be more like, give me money, I'll buy it for you, you'll get it in a month type of thing.
What didn't that happen with like Wall Street silver? Similar, like where you got a break or something happened where I remember you were telling me about that with that huge Wall Street silver push.
No, that's a little bit different. But that explains what I do, or what the COMEX does. So that Friday, typically what we do on a Friday, so the market is open 24/7 around the world, but it closes at like 6 o'clock Eastern on Friday and opens up at 6 o'clock Eastern on Sunday. For those 2 days, it's closed. So typically what I do on a Friday is we will buy, like in silver, we may buy 5, 6, 7, 8 COMEX contracts at 5,000 ounces a piece and go long on COMEX. So I'm long, let's say 50, 60, 70,000, well, maybe not that much, 40, 50, 60,000 ounces of silver over the weekend. And that way, if I get big orders, I have them hedged when the market opens up, no matter what it does. If the market spikes up against me, I have it hedged on those contracts I buy on Friday. And so when Silver Squeeze happened, we all knew something was going to happen on Friday. And my head trader called me up over the weekend, because this started on like Thursday night, Friday morning, and something like that. And he says to me, what should we do? And I said, well, why don't you buy 11 contracts? And so we were 55,000 ounces long over the weekend. And then that night, I'm getting calls from people saying AppMex and JM Bullion have closed their websites. They're not taking any new orders. And everyone thought they ran out of product. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. More likely what happened is what happened to me. Now, at this point, I'm like, wow, that's crazy. And I hadn't heard from my trader. I didn't know exactly what was going on. Saturday morning, I'm in Florida. He's in Minnesota. I get a call at 5:30 in the morning. That means it's 4:30 in the morning in Minneapolis. He was in Fargo, actually. And he says, you sold 90,000 ounces last night. And I'm doing interviews all night long. I'm talking to people all night long, all around the world. He says, you sold 90,000 ounces, or we did. You're 45,000 ounces naked, exposed to the open. And oh, by the way, everyone's talking about the open gapping way up. And that can put you out of business if you're on the wrong side of that. So we closed our site. We stopped taking orders until Sunday night when the market opened. And it did open up a few bucks, and it cost us, $2.50 an ounce on 45,000 ounces. We were out $100,000. That's part of doing business. But that's the whole issue with offsetting risk on COMEX. If you are not able to hedge and the market moves against you, and you've agreed to sell it at this price and it opens way up here, how are you going to get the metal to facilitate that promise? Well, you better have enough cash to be able to do it, or you've ruined your reputation forever. So the point of it is that the COMEX being open allows companies to take orders without money in hand, and it allows us to speculate or to hold large inventories without risk of market swings against us.
Wow, that's a crazy story. I'm gonna have to clip that little story and like make it short out of it. By the way, shout out to my editor, man. That dude that's been making clips. That's been so cool. People love
Yeah,
those
it's I appreciate that. I
he
think they're
puts
very
the
cool as well.
subtitles, little like pictures of like of facts you say. He'll like prove it with the. Anyways, this person says, please talk about mindset of bartering. If an ounce of silver buys 1 gallon of milk today, do I assume that it will buy the same quantity of milk in the future, irrespective to the current fiat costs on that day? I mean, that I could answer that. It's a little, but yeah, what do you think?
I mean, how the hell does anyone really know?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, let's use gold as an example. I mean, gold is at all-time highs in China. Gold is at all-time highs around the world. Because gold didn't go higher, or did it? Or is it the currencies that we measure it against have fallen? In other words, everything is valued in dollars right now. And so gold in dollar terms isn't at all-time highs, but on Monday it reached all-time highs against the yuan. So the point of it is that if you envision gold on a bathtub and the water underneath it, the currency, if you pull the plug on the tub, is it gold that went higher, or is it the dollar that fell further?
Right.
And so in that environment, I would assume that milk would go higher too. But yes, you would argue that the metal would in fact retain its purchasing power, and if not accentuate it.
Yeah.
It's a fair question. In both instances, the dollar falls, both items go higher in price. So that's the whole point of what gold and silver do for you. They retain your standard of living, because as the dollar loses value, commodities become worth more or cost more. The metal that you own will retain its value. And it's proven that for, thousands of years, really.
Yeah. Like a Walking Liberty $0.50 could get you a gallon of gas back in the day, because gallon of gas was 50 cents. That same coin can get you a gallon of gas today. Not
Right.
50 cents, but you could
Well,
go take that
that's
Walking
over
Liberty
$10,
and
right? It's
send
probably
$10
9 or
and get yourself a couple
$10.
gallons.
So
Yep.
it'll get you a couple gallons of
Yep.
gas,
A couple
depending
gallons.
upon what state you're in, up to 3. And the same thing is true when you look at 1960. Gold was $39 an ounce, and the average price of a house was $17,000, according to the Census Bureau. Well, let's look at that. So if you take 17,000 divided by 39, it's like 435 ounces. So that would have bought you a house in 1960, the average house in middle America. Now the average house, let's call it $350,000, $400,000. Well, 430 ounces of gold, or 435, or whatever the exact number is, well, that's, almost $1 million. That buys you 2 or 3 houses. And that gold that you would have not traded, even though you thought about it, you had it, your grandfather gave it to you, let's say, that's been earning nothing but dust for the past 60 years, no interest. And it still has kept pace with the devaluing of the dollar, and actually outpaced it, where that same home you know, that was 16,000 is now 300,000, but the gold that you could have used to buy it buys you 3 homes now instead of that one. And the same thing, you go all the way back in history and find other examples. This $20 gold coin right here in 1907 would have bought you a suit and a tie and a overcoat. 20 bucks right now won't even buy you a tie, but that ounce of gold, 2,000 bucks. You think you're going to get a suit and a tie and an overcoat for that? I do. So the point of it is that you go back through all of time and you'll notice a constant theme that it's not about becoming wealthy. It is wealth that retains its purchasing power in the light of declining currency valuations.
Yeah.
And that's the story.
Yep. David Morgan used that reference, the gold coin in the suit thing, when I interviewed him.
I love
like
David.
that.
He's a good friend. And
yeah,
if you're listening, David, hope you're well, brother.
this person says talk about the 50% decrease in shorts on SLV and the big players and what that could mean for the price of silver.
Well, you know, and this is something I worry about, you know, for those people who are so bullish on the ETF, the Bitcoin ETF. You know, you could look at since the inception of the ETFs, the price of gold and silver have gone higher, but it also gives them the ability to naked short. Now, why would you be able to naked short an ETF, which the whole idea of an ETF is it's a one-to-one, it's a proxy. In other words, each share represents a certain amount of silver or a certain amount of gold. Like I think it's 1/10 of an ounce of gold or 10 ounces of silver. And if you are supposedly able to do that, each share that you create has to have a corresponding amount of silver behind it. Why would you be able to naked short it? And all it does is allow the market to be suppressed by the banks. It's another way of doing it. You also see these large banks who hold large amounts of shares in SLV will sell it and redeem it for metal, and it's much more private than taking it off a COMEX. So the fact that you're seeing less of a short position ultimately would be bullish, yes. And it's been a big deal. I mean, the naked short position has been massive on it, and it really is a manipulative tool that I think kind of sucks. So to see it decrease is a positive thing for sure.
Yeah. So I saw I know it's kind of getting long, so I want to just kind of fill some of the more interesting ones. I thought this was a pretty good one. I would be interested to know what Andy collects. We all want bullion for the value and security against the falling dollar and global unrest, but we all have some amount of premium bullion coins around or historical coins. We collect things that a pure stacker would believe is a complete waste. What can Andy not resist and acquires for himself?
I don't like any modern minted bullion numismatics.
Same.
I don't.
Yeah.
I like pre-33 numismatics. I love the Morgan silver dollar.
Same.
I love the Peace silver dollar, which is 1936 and before. But in gold, I love the pre-33. You can make the analogy to baseball cards. You look at the baseball cards from the turn of the century, way back when, and kids didn't know to take care of them. They put them in their bicycle spokes. They play games with them. You find the old baseball cards, the Babe Ruths, the Ty Cobbs, the Cy Youngs. I have them on my wall right here. They're all framed, and you can see some of them right there in those frames.
Wow.
There, those are
Nice.
all old baseball cards, and Cy Young and Babe Ruth and Ty Cobb and all the Mickey Mantles and all of those cards that are worth a lot of money because people didn't understand that they had to take care of them. They're all certified by PSA, which is the same company like PCGS
Yep.
that certifies the coins.
Yep.
And so when you have all of these old cards or old coins that are in uncirculated condition, they truly are rare. When you have modern minted coins, it's like the new baseball cards. Everyone knows that they should be in perfect condition, et cetera, et cetera. So if you're going to spend money to buy collectible, for me, buy the old stuff, which is truly rare, instead of buying modern minted stuff where a story was created out of it. So, I mean, look, I think when you build a hot fudge sundae, you start with a big bowl of vanilla ice cream. And there's nothing wrong with having cherries and hot fudge and sprinkles on it. Whatever that means to you is fine. You're doing it knowing that you've got the base of your your portfolio covered in vanilla bullion. But if I'm buying numismatics personally, I buy the pre-33 stuff.
I do have one newer coin that I bought, but there's a reason. I bought I have an MS70 2021 Morgan. And I did that because it was the 100-year anniversary. First year they brought Morgans back since 1921. And I have an MS70 version, so like, and even more valuable, they canceled them next year. So,
There
2022
are
Morgan.
examples of where the modern
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
is great.
Like,
And I bought the Morgans and the Peace Dollars that came out as well.
yeah.
But
But that's
more
one of
often
the,
than not, that modern
yeah.
stuff is more fluff than
Yeah.
it is
It's
substance.
pay for the coin, not the slab, is what like
Right.
the silver
Right.
stackers always say.
Yeah,
That's
it's
kind
true.
of, yeah. But yeah, man. All right. Well, yeah, we can wrap it up here. So we covered a lot in this episode. I thank everyone for the questions. And hopefully we answered as many. I know there's a couple more, but
I got time. I could do one or two more if
all
you
right.
want.
Yeah, we could do one more. I saw another one was pretty interesting. Um, so let's I want to find it good. So ask Andy his thoughts on silver drawdown and the bank's yearly account settlement due March. Wait, what? Ask Andy his thoughts on silver drawdown and the bank's yearly account settlement due March in relation to physical silver availability and premiums worldwide. Do
I'm not
you
sure on that question.
I don't
Not exactly sure what he's saying, but
yeah,
what I can tell you is that you're seeing right now the commercial banks in a bullish position. The managed money has gone short, and so the commercial banks have covered a lot of their short contracts. I'm not exactly sure what he's saying,
yeah.
but
Someone else,
suffice it. I'm sorry.
this person says something about March. He said this another questions, definitely more info on the bank term funding program. And if it ends in March, what could that do to precious metals markets?
Well, it is going to end in March. They've publicly said that, and I think March 11th. Think. And they also just closed the arbitrage loophole where for the last few months, banks were able to borrow from the Fed through that program at 4.8% and then give it back to them and get paid 5.3%. Talk about stupidity. It's like they come in your front door and you lend them money at 4.8%, and then they come in your back door and they lend you money and you pay them 5.3% on the money you just borrowed them. So, or lent them. So, it is going to stop. And there's $140 billion or so in that right now. In fact, this morning, New York Community Bank Corp opened up 38% down. Boom, just like that. And this is one of the banks that was, I believe, had something to do with taking over Signature Bank, I think. All I can tell you is that the share price opened up down 38%, and they halted trading, and it's back open again now. And in fact, it was down even like 40 some percent. It's down 37% right now, but there will be bank problems. It's coming. And I would say to you that that's where a lot of the problems will start. The BTFP program is closing, and look, they've injected a lot of money into the system through that program. It's another form of quantitative easing, and continuing to bail out. The difference between a capitalistic economy and a free market economy is that in a free market, you let these banks die. In a market that is manipulated, you continue to paper things over, and it's a last ditch attempt to paper things over by having those types of programs. But it just means in the end, when it all blows up, it'll be that much worse. And so I would say to you, that's a good question. Watch it closely. Watch New York Community Bank Corp. Inc. And the ticker is NYCB. I think you'll see more banks start to run into problems, especially as we get close to that funding program ending.
Well, all right, guys. I think we can wrap it up here. We will be doing another episode next week, so stay tuned. Also, remember Slayer at milesfranklin.com. We have tons of stuff, so make sure that you guys email me. I'll call me on the phone, whatever, email, whatever works best.
I need
And
to ask you to, don't mean to interrupt you. Maybe we can do something early Friday morning next week. I am going on
yeah,
my annual guys ski trip to Colorado on
nice.
on Monday. I come home Thursday night. So
Okay.
maybe early Friday morning this next week. And then after that, my intentions are to strive to stay regular every Wednesday.
Yeah.
But this is something I look forward to every single year. So I appreciate
that's gonna be fun. That's
your
awesome.
willingness to pivot there with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe. See you guys tomorrow. Peace.